Well, my name is Elizabeth McCoy, and I am a professional pastaya. I'm a pasta maker out here in Los Angeles. My religious background is kind of a little bit all over the place, but I would say that it most centers around traditional Haitian voodoo. It's kind of funny how that happened. I was raised by two loving, encouraging atheists. And, you know, my father was a folklorist, so there were always books on the occult around the house. There were books on, Celtic magic. There were, I got my first copy of Bullfinch's Mythology when I was 6 years old. So I never grew up thinking religion was very conventional. And I went through my horror movie phase when I was 13, and my father showed me a movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow by Wes Craven. And it was his voodoo movie. And for whatever reason, I thought to myself, I need to know more about this. There was something that just resonated so deeply with me that I went and I literally begged my parents to buy me every book they could on voodoo. And my parents, encouraged me to read. I don't think they thought I would get serious about it. And I remembered taking myself through the initiation. I remember the first time that I was actually a horse for one of my patron gods, and there is no way to describe this without it sounding crazy, but this is what I do. The tattoo on my chest is for my patron, my goddess Erzule. She is the voodoo goddess of love and vengeance. And I also work with Maman Brigitte, appropriately, who is one of the graveyard law. She's one of the Gide, and it's lore that the first woman to die in a city is always dedicated to Maman Brigitte. They say that is Brigitte. She walks people to the graveyard to her husband, who lets them in. So I work with a lot of the kind of life cycle magic. I also practice chaos magic, which I discovered after reading a book called Generation Hex, and the writer Grant Morrison had done an essay on throwing sigils and on chaos magic, and I started playing around with it. That's really not a great term to use because you don't exactly play with this stuff, but I got too many results to say I don't think it's working. I got some pretty solid results, which actually relates a lot to my work with the supernatural and with psychic abilities, actually. My first supernatural experience, I remember it so clearly. I mean, you don't forget that. You don't forget it the way that I got it. I was about 6 years old, and I was already an insomniac when I was a kid. And I had my bedroom door open, and it opened out into the hallway, and I could see my parents' bedroom door down the hallway. I left it open in case I needed anything at night. And I remember laying there awake, and I got this feeling, just this overwhelming, there's someone here feeling. And I looked up and down the hall, and I saw this form. The only impression I can say was that it was this green form that looked like it was a man stumbling down the hall trying to hang on to the walls, and then I saw him fall face first, and he vanished. I screamed my head off. My parents thought I was having a nightmare. I could barely explain what I saw. And the next day, I went to my mother and I said, oh my God, last night, this is what I saw. And I just remember she looked at me and she goes, did your father tell you? I went, tell what? And then she dropped it. A couple of years later, she said, well, before we moved into that apartment, the previous tenant had died. And he died of a heart attack that apparently started while he was in the bathroom, which is in the midpoint of that hallway. You had the bathroom that went that way. And he tried to get back to his room to get to his wife and died in the doorway. It was my bedroom. So basically, I saw the last moments of this man's life. And after that, I started realizing that I could tell almost immediately, walking into a room, that there was someone there. I always knew. I always knew what was going on, and I could start giving details to people. And I don't know how it happened. It just was how it was. And when I got a little bit older, I'd say about the same time I started practicing voodoo, I started kind of more openly talking about the paranormal and the occult with my grandmother. Now, my grandmother fled Nazi Germany. She was German. She brought all of her folklore with her. My dad actually interviewed her, and her folk tales are still on record at the University of Arizona. They did not have a record of her village's stories until my dad did the interview. Now, she also brought a lot of her folk magic with her. She brought stuff like dowsing with her. She brought, fortune telling with her. She taught me how to read tarot, and she taught me how to throw runes. And my Aunt Karina also very much encouraged it. She bought me one of my very first ceremonial necklaces that I used initially when I was learning voodoo. It's a black and red necklace to Papa Legba, who is the god of the crossroads. He is the one you call upon to allow yourself to work with the Loa. He has to open the gates. You have to invoke him before you can invoke your patron. And they used to very much encourage, me exploring the paranormal. And I mean, it was beyond just, oh, I want to read all these ghost stories. I want to read about haunted houses. I want to watch horror movies. There was something that drew me to places that were haunted. Maybe it was that I know something you don't know, or I see something you don't see, but people would bring me with them when they were ghost hunting because they knew that something would happen. And I'd say as I got older and I started practicing more and, opening up myself, and I used to, use tarot. I've used a Ouija board. I highly don't recommend those for anybody playing around with it. I'll come back to that story, but I really don't recommend it. Don't try this at home, kids. I've used pendulums to focus my, ability. You got to understand, it's just always been there. I never thought of it as something different until I started frightening people with it when I was younger. But everywhere I went, I would notice that pretty much every apartment I've lived in has wound up being haunted, either before or after the fact that I moved in. I've had people who have experienced it actually. I will say one of the more intense experiences I've ever had with it was I had fallen in with a guy who used to go ghost hunting, and he used to invite things to come back with him. And everybody I knew said he had a dark energy around him, and you could feel it when he walked into the room after a while. I didn't notice it at first, but the longer I interacted with him, the more I always felt like there was something just directly behind his shoulder glaring at me. And he was a con artist. I wound up kicking him out, but as I was getting evidence on him, I remembered being in my kitchen. He'd been staying with me. I was in my kitchen, I was making coffee. All of a sudden, I heard a voice right here next to my ear go, "Fuck you." And I turned around because I fully expected to see someone there. There was nobody there. So I kicked him out. And I didn't let him take any of his stuff because he owed me money. And I said, no, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to recoup my losses. And you just need to leave town. And I remember the night that I kicked him out, I slept on the couch facing the door because I felt like there was something waiting outside my door. I felt like there was something in that hallway that if I kept my eyes on that door, I'd see something. And I remember that night, I would see shadows passing back and forth. My bathroom and my vanity area were here in a little alcove, and the door was here. And I saw what looked like a shadow pacing back and forth. And I knew it was one of those, it really felt like a Mexican standoff. It's like, who's gonna blink first, me or it? And about a month later, I started dating somebody. And I told him a little bit about what happened, but I didn't want to freak him out because I didn't know where he stood on the occult and the paranormal. But I remember when he saw something, when it decided to show itself to him. I was in the shower, and he was sitting on the couch, and he was hanging out with my cats, and all of a sudden my cats both stopped and both looked up towards the door. And as he looked, he saw the door slam itself shut, like something had started to come in and then went away. And he ran out into the hallway, and there was no one there. He didn't even hear footsteps down the hallway. He hadn't seen anything under the door. And he came into the shower, he comes banging on the door. He's like, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but you need to know what just happened. And I came clean to him about what had been going on. And he looked at me and he goes, okay, now I don't feel weird. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, the last few nights that I've stayed over, I felt like there is someone standing over the bed glaring at me. And I had to call in 2 of my friends who are also into the occult, and we basically did the, I suppose, psychic equivalent of crime scene cleanup. I mean, we smudged, we blessed, we prayed, we practically took a flamethrower to the place, but it took the collective effort of 3 people to kick this thing out. Now, an equally intense experience actually happened within the last 6 months. My boyfriend was a quite successful tarot reader when he was younger. And we've known each other for about 7 years. And when I met him, I was photographing a band he was in. And I just remembered looking up when I saw him on stage, and it wasn't one of those, oh God, keep musician. It was, I know you. I don't know why, but I know you. And when we started talking, we started mentioning things that actually haven't happened as far as we know, but we share memories, and it's a little awkward. And then we realized that we had a connection. It was beyond the cutesy couple, we finish each other's sentences. No, we would start talking in unison. We knew when the other person was thinking of the other person. Whenever I'd come home from work, he always knew the minute I walked in. I'd never tell him if I was delayed because I started wanting to test this. He always knew when I was home, and he would always call exactly 5 minutes after I got home. After I'd taken off my shoes, I'd sit down on the couch and my phone would ring. And I'd say, yeah, you knew. And he goes, yeah, I know you're on the couch. So we would share a lot of experiences like that. Now, at one point, we had broken off contact. We'd broken up. We hadn't seen each other in 4 years. And there would always be these moments where I'd think, he's thinking about me right now. He's thinking about me. And it would get to the point where I would have to start figuring out ways. I call it a dimmer switch. The dimmer switch is a visual cue I use to turn down hearing surface thoughts, hearing what people are thinking, because I find it very intrusive a lot of times. Sometimes I do have control over it. The more emotional I get, I have much less control over it. He's the same way. When we got back together, I looked at him and I said, I could probably name exact dates and times of when you were thinking about me. He goes, I always wondered if you could still hear me. So when we got back together, he asked me about the occult, and he wanted to start learning about voodoo. And I'm always very careful about teaching people this because it really is literally a full body, full mind commitment to practice voodoo. You give up something of yourself in exchange for what you get from the law. So we started dialoguing about it, and I warned him. I said, you're talking about it now. I said, I know you can do things, and you need to know that things are listening. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I get the feeling that things are now aware of you. After that, well, his house started getting very interesting out of nowhere. I mean, literally, like ghost out of fucking nowhere. We would be in his, he had his workshop in the upstairs. It's a 2-floor house. His workshop was upstairs. His bedroom was at the end of the hall. I mean, this house is massive. I get lost in it sometimes. And we would hear people walking around downstairs. I distinctly remember at one point, we were both in the bedroom. We were getting ready to go to bed, and we knew there was someone at the foot of the bed. And he couldn't see it. He knew I could see it. And he knew that I had been seeing things around the house. I'd been seeing shadows. I could hear voices. I'd go to bed by myself and I'd hear somebody whispering in the closet, and like a full stage whisper in the closet. But around Halloween last year, things went completely off the fucking hook. Ironically, we were upstairs in his office watching Poltergeist with a friend of ours who had never seen it before. And as we're sitting there, his upstairs office door opens. Full, hear it unlatch, hear the doorknob turning, and it opened. and the blinds started moving, and his cat started flipping out. His cat knew something was going on. She immediately jumped into his lap and kept staring very intently at some point in the room. And I knew someone was in the room. We both knew. His friend was blissfully unaware of it because she was very caught up in the movie. But we were both sitting there going, what the hell just happened? And about 3 hours later, we were down in the living room with his friend, and we heard the office door slam shut. We heard it slam shut, and we had closed and locked it before we'd gone downstairs. And we heard it slam shut, and there are no other doors upstairs. So we did a major smudging. That got rid of it, but there's still stuff poking around there. Every once in a while something likes to try to tell him hi, and I'm like, you really need to get back to learning this stuff so that you can shut that off, because I'm getting really tired of cleaning up your messes. Literally. God, as far as what I've done to enhance and control it, I talked a little bit about the dimmer switch. And I think about it like those lights that you control by rotating a knob. And I focus on turning it down like that when I really don't feel like hearing anybody. But when I do feel like hearing people, I turn it up. I work a lot with the tarot cards. Big secret, I don't know what the cards mean. I don't know what a single one of those cards mean because I'm not reading the cards. I'm reading what's coming to people's minds when they look at the cards' images. You know, it's like the death card. Nobody ever views that card the same way. And once somebody views that, they've opened themselves up to me. And I can start figuring things out from there. And I have a very high accuracy rate. I've done the Zener cards. That was actually fun. When I was about, I'd say 14 years old, it was science fair at my school. And I decided to do, does meditation promote psychic powers? Because this is me. And I picked 20 people, and I included myself in the sample. I bought a pack of Zener cards, which are, if you've seen Ghostbusters, it's that wonderful little deck with the different symbols. You hold up a card with the back of it to somebody, and they guess which symbol's on the card. They're not supposed to guess, but, you know, the guess rate's pretty high on that. And, you know, I did that, and me and one other person scored almost perfect on both of them after the meditation. So I started doing meditation to kind of focus it. Nothing too special, nothing really denominational, just clear my head. I do a very general, I would say it feels like it's generic relaxation. You know, it's something that I picked up on as a visualization when I was learning ritual magic. I basically sit down and I imagine packing everything into a suitcase in my head. All of my stray thoughts, all of my worries, all of my anxiety, all of everybody else's thoughts, just putting it into a suitcase, closing it, locking it, and literally throwing it down, throwing it into the void, throwing it into darkness until I don't see it anymore. And basically I unpack my mind. I unpack my mind, I pack up everything that doesn't belong there, and I can work from there. That really is the first thing I tell anyone is be open. Don't come into it just going, well, nothing's going to happen, or, well, nothing will probably happen, because believe it or not, you're already setting yourself up to fail. Come open. There's a lot more listening than you think there is. Actually, there's always someone listening. Yes, that's very welcome to Night Vale right there. But, you know, walk into it with an open mind. Don't fuck with Ouija boards. I say this as somebody who witnessed probably one of the more frightening manifestations when I had a roommate who decided to fuck around with a Ouija board. And that was the only time that I have ever actually been physically attacked by something that wasn't technically there. Don't open a door that you can't close. But definitely come open. Talk. You know, go into a room, say, you know, I'm very much a fan of EVPs when I go ghost hunting. When I go into a place, I'd like to be able to give people, you know, not only the evidence, but I'd like to be able to give whatever is around me a chance to be heard. Because I really, the thing that makes me the saddest about, you know, presences that are around is that they're constantly trying to get people's attention. And 9 times out of 10, people are so closed off. You know, either because their religion says be against this, they were raised a skeptic, they just cannot wrap their mind around there being a bigger world around them than what they can see. You know, imagine trying to talk to somebody who's right in front of you and they're just blanking you out. I mean, this is a lot of these creatures' existence. So I try to give them a forum. You know, listen. You know, don't immediately discount anything that happens. Don't immediately go the skeptic route. Say, well, let's see if it happens again. Say, well, is there an explanation? But don't just immediately throw it out. Because yes, these people, these creatures, do get pissed off sometimes. Oh God, well, the internet is a fabulous, fabulous thing now. I had originally gotten, Raymond Buckland had written a book on voodoo, and that's really like voodoo light. This is like, oh, well, I used to practice Wicca, now I kind of want to play with something a little bigger and possibly more dangerous, but no. There are so many resources online. Literally type in voodoo, you will find something good. But do be aware that this is not a fuzzy religion. This is not a warm and fuzzy religion like Wicca is. This is not a warm and fuzzy religion like Christianity can be in the right hands. This is very much a nothing is for free. Absolutely nothing is for free. From keeping an altar to your loa, to literally offering yourself up as basically a free ride for your loa to communicate through. Nothing is for free. So when you get into it, be very well aware that you will be asked for something at some point. And be very well aware that if you do enter into an agreement with a loa, that there will be a lot of back and forthing, controlling when they can come and talk to you, controlling what they can and cannot do around you. It becomes, for lack of a better word, a symbiotic relationship. You don't pray to your gods in the sky, you wear your gods under your skin.